Ben is the Chief Executive Officer of the new LAF known as Rumour. And today I'm really, really excited because Ben is a person that's got a very, very deep understanding of technology. That's his background. And firstly, Ben, thank you for joining us. How are you going?
Very well, Tom. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes. So, Ben, listen, AI, this has come out of, like, there are so many things going on at the moment. And I've got to say to you, Ben, AI is one, but I've just noticed we're having a lot of real estate agents ringing me up in the last month saying, Tom, our sales model's changing as well. And I said, why is that? And they said, you got to understand, we're just finding it really, really hard to actually contact as many people as we were before, because all these iOS updates, Androids that allow screen calling means that we're just not getting the same connects that we were getting before. So that's, when you layer that against AI, it's the changing landscape, Ben.
Yeah, massive. But it's not the first time that there's been an upheaval of something inside of real estate, right? And we were talking the other day, the sort of the different revolutions within the market. So, including the advent of the portals. I'd probably slot social media in there as well, in between that and what we're seeing more recently. And so I think my first point I want to make is we are unashamedly pro agent.
Yes.
You can talk technology all day long, but ultimately this is still a property it's a transaction that is the most financially significant in most Australians' lives. And there will always be a degree of some physicality to it, right? So I think, like every other industry across the country and the world, not to make it too melodramatic, boundaries are going to be redrawn in terms of what role do we have, right? No question. But we are actually on the side of the ledger in terms of excitement versus fear. We're definitely on the excitement side. And I think, if we get it right, actually we should end up with, better outcomes for homeowners and better outcomes for agents. But can I ask you a question? So in the last few weeks, probably a few months, but I'm guessing it's gone up. What in the auction setting, as an example, what have you seen that you haven't seen before?
Okay. And it was really distinct because I took 4 or 5 weeks when I was overseas. And when I came back, I saw a change. So the biggest change I saw, Ben, were buyers stop relying on real estate agents as much for guidance on prices. And I noticed a lot of them started talking into their mobile phones. I did actually speak to a few, and they were actually doing fact checking on prices on ChatGPT. I definitely noticed that. I've also noticed, anecdotally, vendors doing a little bit of research on AI, and then getting information that they get from that, coupled with, the portals. So probably the biggest thing I'm learning is that vendors and buyers are getting a level of understanding nearly equal to that of an agent.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of bang on in terms of the transition and the boundary, right? Because in the 80s, when I was very young, of course, in the 80s, 90s, even into the early new millennium, there was a lot of the prowess, or the apparent prowess, of agents came from being able to say, hey, look, here are the comps, here are the driving factors of the valuation, et cetera, et cetera. And as soon as that is readily available for free in the palm of your hand, then all of a sudden we have to think more deeply about, well, what is it that what is the prowess of the agent, right? And I actually think all this is doing is dusting off all the noise and getting down to the question that really matters, which is not so much what is it worth, but what can you what can you get me for it?
Yes.
Right? Because it's all good and well to have an intellectual view on, I think my property's worth, 2.5. But actually, you still got to find a willing buyer, right? And you still got to match it, and you still got to get the best out of the potential of that property, right? Which is not an intellectual exercise, or it's more than an intellectual exercise, and it gets back to what I think is really exciting about the new role, or the re-emphasized role of the great agents, whose superpower has always been empathy. Is that?
Yeah. But
I'm not as I'm not a veteran like yourself, but empathy and the ability to read the room, the ability to understand the circumstances, and take the information relating to the situation and then turn it into a result. You've actually got to turn it into a result. And so I think if we sort of say, well, all of a sudden that the stuff that was historically hard to come by, which is now freely available, which is, comps, historicals, and a prediction about what it might be worth. And we get more of the discussion in the lounge room happening around, well, why, on what basis am I going to choose the person who's going to carry me through the process and turn that theoretical concept of value into real cash? Right. And so I think in some ways it kind of takes the agent away from some of the headaches of the administrivia of the job, right, and to really differentiate on the thing that counts.
So your view, Ben, is AI is good for the real estate industry, bad for what's your view?
I think it's so. I would say it's happening. Right. And so the good or the bad of it is sort of, we can ponder that. But actually, like every other revolution within the real estate industry, there will be great agents who are able to exploit the position and the trend. Right. And there'll be those who are, slower to get on or get out of position as a result of it. Right. And so I think our focus is, has always been for, nearly 20 years now, is give the agent the opportunity to get in the lounge room to have the conversation that matters, right? And if we talk about something that's probably a bit touchy in terms of some of the sort of regulatory actions on price quoting, all that sort of stuff, might the democratization of valuation actually kind of help take care of that, right? Yeah. And even in a less sort of extreme scenario, on conversations like with a homeowner, being able to bypass that discussion where you're sort of wondering, well, what do they think it's worth? How do I need to navigate that with them? And it almost accelerates the language that is needed to then get to the stuff that matters. Right, and to avoid or at least diminish some of those conversations on topics that are just a bit awkward, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Because you really don't want to be in the room going, well, I think it's worth this, and the homeowner says, well, Freddie told me a different number. What gives? If we can kind of baseline the situation, or if the homeowner is able to baseline the situation in a way that's less charged, then all of a sudden you're having a conversation that's more about the capability to get the result in real life.
Yeah. And I think, Ben, this is one of the real big challenges and some of those sensitive issues you've been talking about is that unlike a commodity like a mobile phone or a BHP share or sugar, real estate doesn't have a recommended retail price. Like everyone has a view, right?
Yeah.
And what was fascinating is I've walked out of a property a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a buyer. We got chatting about Teslas because he had a Tesla. He had a brand new Tesla. That's right. He had a brand new Tesla, and I was looking at this new Tesla, the Tesla Y, and he's on his phone doing his research. And I said, Then what happened is he turned around and he said to me, I'm not going to ask a real estate agent who's getting paid by a vendor what is a fair price for this house. He said, quite frankly, that would be the last thing I would do. I said, what's your first thing? He says, the first thing I would do is previously I would have actually gone on to things like the websites and look at the just sold section. He goes, but now there's even a faster way. I'll just sort of do it there on the phone. What do you reckon the implications of commissions are to this, Ben?
Yeah. So I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Yeah.
I think there's two forces at work, right? If we think about the operations and admin side of real estate, the cost of that will compress, right? So, but let's park that to one side. We assume at some point the industry will adopt, as they've adopted things like social media, there'll be a level of adoption which will bring down the cost of delivering the service, right? That may have some, dampening effect on, top line commission, but not margins, right? So let's park that one. The more important question is, with more information, being available to the consumer, and more ability to synthesize, complex information, in order to inform decisions, will it increase commissions? I actually think that there are parts of the market where that will definitely happen. The commissions will increase, right? Why? Because how often do agents get dragged into the lounge room wanting to have the conversation about how to get the best result, but actually they're already in a race to the bottom, right? Because someone has said, oh, well, so-and-so will do it for, some stupid figure. The beauty of this type of technology, right, which is really an extension of some of the machine learning that we've seen, over the last couple of decades, right? But it's now sort of supercharged and far more readily available, is that the nuance of decisions can be surfaced through this technology. So, for example, contrast hey, which commission should I go with? Well, the cheapest one because it'll cost me less. A more nuanced discussion, which we do, in our own way, and when we're having the chat in the lounge room, is you might be, saving a couple of points on commission, but actually, wiping out, 0.75% on your sale price, and it just doesn't make sense. So, we've always been in that sport, right? As LocalAgentFinder and now Rumour, we've always been in that sport, which is the price conversation's got to be had, but actually the more nuanced sort of understanding of what are you getting for your money, right? And being able to have that discussion in, some interactions where the agent's not even present, right? But to your point, Tom, for some of these issues, the homeowner likes to form a view that's that's independent of having that chat. Right, it doesn't preclude the chat. In fact, the chat becomes almost more necessary in order to glean those competitive advantages that are going to get them the best price. Right, but actually, it kind of diffuses a lot of these kind of awkward discussions. So I'm kind of in the side of, hey, this could actually be an age in which great agents, using their superpower of empathy and specialising their craft accordingly, might find they're actually getting better commissions.
Well, look, I did a bit of research over the weekend on real estate commissions around the world, Ben, and I've got to tell you, it's quite fascinating. Australia and the UK, New Zealand next to it, are the lowest fees in the world. I couldn't get over it, and I was having a look at what's happening in the US. I see what's happening in parts of Europe, 7-8%. I mean, Australia's got a bit of a unique thing. We are an auction culture, so days on market are shorter, and people could turn around and say, oh, well, you're getting the fee in a third of the time versus another country. We don't have the buyer-seller split that they have in
Yep.
the UK. And sometimes, but you've been around. Sometimes there's no logic to things. It's just this is what we've done. It's like this is what we do in Melbourne, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think going back to that sort of the excitement side of the ledger, um, Warwick and I talk about this quite often, is, the role of, structured commissions,
Yeah.
right? With complex, often people avoid it because it's too complex. How do I kind of understand how it's going to, play through, et cetera, et cetera. For the right homeowner and the right agent, right, for the right fit, sometimes those more incentive aligned, structures may in fact become more common, right? And again, like giving the homeowner more capability to be able to make those calculations and form a more nuanced view of what is the best outcome for them, may in fact, break some of those traditions. Because you're right. Like industries tend to adopt conventions by force of history, right? So we're quite excited about some of that. And if you compare it to, say, investment banking, the greatest deals done in investment banking, often the client looks back and says, "Wow, that was a big, big fee, but geez, I'm happy because they were motivated." Right? They weren't picked because they were the cheapest. They were picked because they were, the best. And they had confidence, and they backed that confidence with a fee structure that meant they got paid very well in the end. Right now, there's no difference. We're talking about a smaller scale in real estate, but I'm surprised that that's not adopted, or it's not more prevalent, right? And I think that may be one of those areas where consumers get more confidence.
Yeah, I used to. So when I was listing and selling real estate, I'd get it. I'd normally get, and I never brought it up. Looking back, I should have, but I'd get a lot of often owners of company, people in business that would say, "Oh, mate, so you reckon if we got a mill, mate, I'll give you 1.5, and if you got over a mill, I'll give you 10%, right?" And what you're sort of saying is that you wouldn't be surprised if performance-based fees, which you should be setting at the listing presentation, not at any other time, right? But listen, I want to, Warwick, when you did the brand read change, and I know that there's something coming in the future, and we're not going to really go into too much detail today, but the brand rechange, and Warwick's got an incredible ability with his cut through with clients is amazing. And I said to him, what are you going to be like, what are you saying to clients about rumor? And he goes, look, all I'm saying to you is that our new brand is now going to be reflecting the new path that we're going, right? Can I ask you, what does, and by the way, it's a beautiful rebrand. I've got to tell you that the ads, they're nice, clean. It's very contemporary, right? I want to ask you, what does the brand rebrand mean to you?
Yeah. So I think we've been doing a really important thing, we think, in the industry for nearly 20 years, right? And that is going to continue, right? And if we think about what is that, what is that
By the
job?
way, it's an amazing. Listen, there was a time I remember at ARIC where local agent finder would set up, and it would be the place that people would go throw apples and oranges because they thought, hey, they're just, they're clipping our ticket, right?
Yeah.
But then slowly over a period of time, people started to realize, hey, hang on a second, getting 90 or 80% of something is better than not getting nothing. And then they started seeing a lot of the big agents were actually using the service, and changed, and the perception of the brand changed.
Yeah. And I think at the heart of it, right, and you touched on the issue of call screening, all that sort of stuff, right? Our reason for being right, is to, basically collide sounds a bit negative, but, interact with a homeowner
Yeah.
in the moment when their mindset is ready to go.
Yes.
Right. We can do that because it's a large platform. We've collected, a whole bunch of data over, nearly 2 decades. That gives us an ability to do that in a way that's less prone to the sort of, call screening, trying to, pump out outbound, communications, etc. Right. So, but put the mechanics to one side. Our job is to get great agents into the lounge room, right? So
Yeah.
get you in the room. That's where the best work is done. That's where the important work is done, right? And so, in some ways, our job is to kind of try and eliminate all the noise that gets in the way of that path into the lounge room so
That's
that
the
the agent can do what they do best and what they love. And so, rumor is a reference to, the rooms that are, so important to homeowners, right? Because this is an asset class where, to which they're bound by both emotional and rational ties, right? And so, the rooms of the home goes so much towards the perception of what is this thing that I'm selling, right? And the room is the destination for the conversation that agents want to have, right? And so that's kind of how we thought about it. It also gives us more flexibility to be able to, offer other services to both our homeowners and agents in the future.
Yeah, you've done, and you've done that before, and I can see you're going to doing it increasingly. I mean, a lot of people may or may not be aware. Dot and Cross It, a legal firm, is incorporated in your business. How's that going?
Really well. Yeah, I mean, they're
Oh,
basically the biggest in New South Wales, and I think you've made a really important point there, Tom, which is that they are a law firm, right?
yeah,
So not all that's not always the case with some of our competitors. It is a law firm, and so fortunately, for my sins, I'm a lawyer as well, and kind of get to read some of the reports and papers and whatnot from the business. But no, that's been a fantastic acquisition for us, and we also know that it's such an important part of the overall process, right? But for both agents and homeowners, and so having a group that you can kind of count on, particularly for a Saturday settlement or those really time sensitive contracts that need to be done. We've got that in house.
well, you've said something. You've said something, Ben, today that will be music to the ears of real estate agents, and that is you want to get them into the arena. You want to get them into what is considered their highest dollar productive work hours. That is in the living room. That is the $10,000 an hour work. But they seem to get caught up in a lot of $20 an hour, $30 an hour work. And what you're sort of saying is you understand the unmet need, and that's where it's heading. Fantastic stuff. Excellent. We'll be looking forward to seeing more of Rumour and what it's got to do. But as I walk away from this Zoom webinar, my view of what you're saying is that, hey, real estate agents aren't going to be replaced by AI. Agents that don't incorporate AI may get replaced, but agents that know how to actually use AI, not to substitute them, but to complement them, to leverage them, to expand them, are going to have this incredible competitive advantage. And what you're also saying is that the cost base of being able to produce the services is that that you still might make the same, even more profits because of the scale that AI is going to give you.
Correct.
All right, Ben. The other thing I like about him, he can speak a few words in Greek. That helps. All righty, but that's you've been Melbourne all your life, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well,
and a great city for the Greek community too, Tom, which is fantastic.
I reckon they should do a state of origin, Athens versus Melbourne. All righty, Ben. thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking the new Chief Executive Officer of Rumour, formerly known as LocalAgentFinder. Many of you, of course, know that via Warwick, who is the client-facing representative of the company. Good to see you. I just want to see, Ben, if there's any things that I haven't covered in the chat that people bring up. Oh, a lot of thank yous. That's a smart idea, says Jeff. Then James says, depends on the quality of the prompt, use of images of the renovated home and then the comparison renovated home. Yep, doesn't. Yeah. Listen, I think there's nothing there that we need to answer.
Yeah, I think just one thing, Todd, there were a couple of great questions in there about, how can it tell whether there's been renos and all that sort of stuff. I think, the gentleman who answered the queries, spot on. That stuff will get better, right? And I think,
Yes.
there will be, specialist providers who and there already are, who are sort of working into, small language models, or small scale models that are, sort of really focused on those types of issues. I think the other question about, will we see a bifurcation or a separation of the market? We've got those who race for the bottom on fees versus those who are able to, really establish their premium. I think that's pretty consistent across most markets, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see that. In fact, I see real estate as all the sort of hallmarks of an industry where that should be possible. And I'm excited about, the opportunity for AI in our business, but also in the hands of the consumer, being able to drive a more nuanced conversation around commission rates.
Well said. Ben, from Rumour, thank you again for joining us. Look forward to seeing you soon.